Okay, why don't we get started? As I mentioned before, well, first of all, let me call the meeting to order. Call the meeting to order for the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District regular meeting for April the 13th. It's about 6:31. I'd like to welcome any guests that were here tonight. And also, Mike had called and said he may be a few minutes late, so we'll have to look for him later on. And I believe that we have a full quorum, don't we, Bobby? Everybody's here from the board managers?
Yep, Steve, all the managers are here.
Okay, great. So why don't we move on then? The first action is to set the meeting agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda proposed? Okay, hearing none, then I'll just call for a motion to approve the agenda as listed.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda as listed.
Thank you, Doug. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you, Manager Anderson. So we have a second. Bobby, do you want to do a roll call vote, please? Thank you.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Moving then on to new business. The first item is item A, the 2022 DIY and CAT water monitoring report. And Blaine, are you going to cover that or
Yes.
introduce it?
Yes, I will. Thank you, President Schmaltz and board members. Just wanted to take a few minutes to share some of the results from the 2022 water or DIY and CAT monitoring programs. I can share my screen here. Got a brief presentation. All right, so thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Some technical difficulties here. All right, our 2022 do-it-yourself diagnostic monitoring program took place on the Sunrise River this year between Comfort and Forest Lake. And our citizen assisted tributary program or CAT program took place on Forest Lake's second and third basins, similarly to what we did in 2021. Before we view the results, just wanted to share with you or put the monitoring effort in the context of the climate from 2022. We've got a chart here. The black is the water accumulation for 2022 over time. The green is the average, and then you can see the spikes. The blue vertical lines are the spikes or precipitation events. So you can see we actually had a normal precipitation year, average precipitation year. However, the majority of the precipitation occurred in the spring. So heavy rains, we had above average precipitation early in the spring. Around mid-June, it kind of dried out, and then we remained very dry for the rest of the monitoring season into the fall, very close to the driest year on record, which was 2020 for that period at least. So the point of this slide here is that we did have drought conditions for much of the monitoring effort, the monitoring period, and as such, we're not able to collect as many samples as we would have liked. So the do-it-yourself diagnostic monitoring occurred between Forest and Comfort Lakes along the Sunrise River. We had 21 locations that were included in the monitoring effort. However, due to drought conditions, we're only able to capture or monitor about 10 of those sites regularly. We're able to collect a few more samples at around another 5 sites, but it was intermittent throughout the monitoring period. We had a total of 47 samples collected and analyzed last year. These are all the monitoring sites here. You can see throughout the Sunrise River watershed, that area. The area that's indicated by the yellow polygon is the county line sub-watershed, where we actually increased monitoring in that area to see if we could tease out where the loading is coming from at that monitoring location. That information is presented in the report, will not be presented here today. We just didn't get enough data there to make any conclusions, but it should be in the report. Here's a look at the data for our DIY effort. It's a box and whisker plot. Just as a reminder, the box represents the interquartile range, or 25% on each side of the median. The line in the box itself is the median, the X being the mean, and then the whiskers represent the lower and upper extremes or max values. Anything that is outside of the whiskers are considered data outliers. We had 5 sampling events in 2022, primarily in the spring, and then we snuck a couple in late in fall and August. Those were not the largest events. So we collected about 47 samples last year. The majority of the water quality grab samples were less than 0.2 milligrams per liter, similar to what we found in 2021. We did have several sites with more elevated orthophosphate levels. Those are the sites indicated in the red boxes there within the data. That would be sites S5, 10, 12, and 15. Those all 4 of those sites are associated with roadways. So we're getting precipitation events on the road. It's running off directly into a culvert. Very little, if any, treatment at all from any vegetation or swales or anything like that. So we've got relatively high orthophosphate levels there. We didn't collect as much data from these locations as we would have liked, so hard to draw conclusions. However, it does give credence to the district's, or the utility of the district's enhanced street sweeping program. We've got nutrient-laden sediments on the roadway. If we can get those off of the roads prior to affecting any of our water resources, then we're that much further to reducing our nutrient goals, reduction goals. Site 14 is the county line road, county line ditch. That's got consistently high readings there for orthophosphate. And we saw that in 2021 as well. And EOR noticed that in 2018 with their monitoring effort. So like I said, we weren't able to tease out where the nutrients were coming from in that basin, but we hope to continue to look at that and with hopes that a more normal precipitation year, at least during the monitoring period, would shed some light on the source of those nutrients. Our CAP program, again, was focused on Forest Lake's 2nd and 3rd basins. We had 9 possible sites, but we're only able to sample about 6 of those regularly. And we collected a total of 28 samples. Again, we've got the higher samples there indicated in the red boxes. The majority of the samples were similar to what we saw in 2021. We did have those higher sites that you can see there. More than likely, those higher readings are associated with or attributed to collecting samples in more stagnant water. When we have low flow, it's very difficult to collect a clean sample without getting any bottom sediments in there. So that could be responsible for some of the higher readings in these samples. Again, we need more data to actually tease out what's going on there. So as you can see by the data, we've got very sparse. There's lots of holes in our data set here. So we're hoping to get more data in the future moving forward. We did have some elevated levels, as I indicated earlier, in the red boxes there at Forest Lake 3-3A, 3-6, and FL20. But again, we likely have some contamination with bottom sediments in those samples. So unfortunately, we aren't able to make too many conclusions from the data set this year, just because of the dry conditions and lack of data collected. In 2022, we also continued our duplicate water quality sample comparison study. So this again is evaluating our DIY technology, the hot colorimeter, which you can see there in the bottom right. So we take EOR collected water samples for us. We separated that into 2 samples. One was taken to the lab, one we did with our hot colorimeter to evaluate the accuracy of that device. This is a continuation of the study that we did in 2021. Here are our results. You can see 2021 on the left, 2022 on the right. We've got a total of 33 samples collected over both years. In general, the hot colorimeter gives us a bit of a higher level, higher concentration of orthophosphate. In 2021, we ran stats, a paired t-test on only 9 samples, so very small sample size, and our data was not normally distributed. So kind of got a false positive there on the results, which indicated that there was no statistical difference between the data sets. In 2022, we looked at all 33 sites. And with the assistance from EOR, we ran a Wilcoxon signed rank test, which compared the difference between the means of the data set, or the average difference between the values for the DIY versus the lab. And with a 95% probability, it indicated that there is indeed a difference between the 2 data sets. So this is counter from what we saw in 2021. However, we have a much larger data set. We're using more appropriate stats. So we can kind of hang our hat on this result here. I did reach out to Hawk to see if there's a way that we can refine or improve accuracy of these units. And they did offer some advice. So we're going to be implementing those techniques this year to hopefully improve accuracy of the DIY tech. So in conclusion, 2021 and 2022 were pretty challenging years for monitoring due to the drought conditions during the monitoring period. We didn't collect as many samples as we would have liked to. Therefore, it's hard to draw any real conclusions from the data set. However, we were able to identify a few hotspots and we'll be focusing on those in 2023. For example, the DIY site at the county line will hopefully, like I said, we'll have a good water year, a normal water year during the monitoring period, and we can get some more data from there and kind of hone in on that source of nutrient. We will continue to expand the CAT program on Forest Lake. Jess Hall, our Green Corps member, has come on and taken the lead on this, and she's been really good at getting volunteers. We have between 5 and 7 volunteers this year. So that's a vast improvement or increase from previous years. She's also been making some training videos and is refining the sites that we'll be looking at this year. So she's made some really great strides with that program. The DIY program will shift to the Comfort Lake direct drainages. And I can say that we've been out for both DIY and CAT already this year and collected a round of samples to get the spring melt here, snow melt. So I'm excited. We're off to a good start already, and hopefully we can maintain that momentum throughout the monitoring season. And in 2023, we'll also continue our duplicate sample comparison study with the assistance from EOR. And finally, I just want to thank our volunteers for the program, which this past year was primarily just Randy Schumacher. So I'd like to thank him. We appreciate his assistance and look forward to working with him in 2023 as well, because he will be one of our volunteers this year. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thanks, Blaine. Any questions from anyone?
I have 2 questions.
Yeah, Manager Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you. My first question is, in a drought year, like we've had 2, and you're pulling up sediment samples rather than the flow samples that you want, is that helpful in any way? It seems to me that might tell us something about what the natural input would be from a sediment sample, but I'm not sure. So I'm asking, would that be of any help when we have years like that, as predicted with the climate change that we're dealing with?
That's Manager Anderson, thank you for that. That's an interesting question. I kind of equate those standing puddles as kind of like a phosphorus tea. We're kind of just having those waters sit in there and interact with the soils there, and we can really have a lot of phosphorus coming out. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to look at, but I'm not sure if they'd tell us a whole lot, because what we really need is the delivery mechanism to get that to one of our bodies of water to actually have an impact.
Okay.
It's just sitting there and evaporates or infiltrates, then it's not impacting the water resource.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be interesting for, consistently, standing puddles or something like that.
Well, or just to see what's in there, yeah, and what could be contributing, yeah. It's easier access, obviously, in a drought year. My second question has to do with Comfort Lake. You said you were going to be increasing the amount of monitoring in that district. And I want to make sure that we get some of the items that we're missing from our diagnostic study as inputs. So maybe I can talk to you about that later on.
Sure, I'd love to.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? We have the action step here is to approve this report. So if someone could make the motion that's stated on the bottom of the announcement, and then we could have a second and then go to a vote.
I'll make the motion as presented. I don't have it pulled up to read, so if you want to do that.
I'll just move to approve the 2022 DIY and CAT monitoring report as presented in this memo and at this meeting.
Okay, that's my motion.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Do we have a second? I will second that motion then. So, Bobby, could you do a roll call vote?
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye.
And motion carries, passes then. Thank you. Next item is item 3B, the 2022 draft water monitoring report. And this is primarily introduced as a discussion item tonight. And then we'd ask that everybody review the report. If you have any questions or suggestions to get back to Mike by April 19th on this. So with that, I don't think Mike's here yet. Celio, did you want to introduce or make some comments on this to introduce the topic?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Chair and managers. We have Rosie and Trevor today with us. And Rosie will be giving the presentation. It's about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Both of them, Trevor and Rosie, presented last year the 2021 monitoring season. Rosie has been the lead project manager for 2022. Trevor has performed the data management, developed the graphics, which were really nice, and also performed the statistical analysis, which is key for the report. I was involved as a senior supervisor and provided quality control of the report at the end. Just giving you a little bit of people involved in the project.
Okay, thank you, Celio. Then Rosie, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, President Schmaltz and board members. Thank you for having us here today. So as Cecilio said, I will be presenting today about the 2022 water monitoring report and the general conclusions that we can take from that. So this figure is similar to what Blaine shared earlier, similar conclusions. So on the top, you can see the precipitation for 2022 compared to the 1991 to 2020 normals. So in blue is 2022. And then beneath that is the temperature for this year, showing whether it was colder or warmer than normal conditions. And so what this basically said is it was a cold and wet spring to start the season, followed by a dry few months. August was wet, but the system was still very dry. 2021's drought really carried over into this year. And like Blaine said, this caused a lot of challenges with collecting water quality samples throughout the season. Here is a figure showing the different monitoring locations for this year and the different types of monitoring. So starting with lake monitoring, which you can see in purple, 15 lakes were monitored this year. And so the lake monitoring program is used to assess progress toward district and state goals. And so this is conducted by district staff and the citizen assisted monitoring program. Then the legacy, so these are the long-term stream sites. These are shown in green. And so these sites we use to look at annual loads and flows discharged from the different lake management districts to track large-scale pollutant reduction. And then the diagnostic, which is shown in orange. So each year, different lake management district has been rotated through. And so this year we focused on Comfort Lake, the Comfort Lake Management District. And so there were 11 sites for this diagnostic monitoring this year. And this is used to identify hotspots, water quality hotspots across the lake management district. And then lastly, in blue, these are the effectiveness monitoring sites. And so each year we'll look at a couple of different projects to assess how well the water quality projects are performing. So to start with the lake monitoring trends, what we're looking at now is just a chart to show the different trends in the various lakes over the last 10 years. And so this looks at since 2013, whether or not a lake has been for total phosphorus in the first column, chlorophyll A in the second column, and Secchi Disc in the third column. You can see whether or not it's been significantly improving, declining, or significantly declining. So the first point to make is that none of these were significantly declining. Secondly, you can see that Forest Middle and Forest East had some declining trends. And there is an alum treatment planned in Forest Middle, which will benefit both Forest Middle and Forest East. Secondly, you can see that Keewatin Lake has a declining trend for Sekidus. However, this lake has exceptional water quality to start with, and this decline is not significant. And so this is not of a concern right now. Here you can see, this is a graph showing historic water quality trends for the growing season average. And so it has Sekidus, chlorophyll A, and phosphorus. And so in green is the state standard. And so here we are just showing that Bone Lake for 5 years has had at least 2 of these parameters below state standards. And so we are recommending considering this lake for delisting from the impaired waters list. For internal loading, so Moody Lake and Shield Lake have both shown positive trends following their alum treatments. So Moody Lake had an alum treatment, their final alum treatment in 2019, and Shield Lake was completed in 2020. And so you can see that it's had a positive impact on water quality in both of those lakes. Next, Little Comfort Lake and Comfort Lake were both monitored for internal loading. And the conclusion for Little Comfort Lake is it does not appear that internal loading is a problem in Little Comfort Lake. So what this graph is showing here is that on the bottom is the hypolimnion. So this is looking at orthophosphate on the very bottom of the lake. The second one is in the middle is the metalimnion. So this is looking to see whether or not the conditions in the bottom of the lake are impacting the surface water quality. And so what we're seeing here is that it's not having an impact on surface water quality. This is Comfort Lake, this graph that you're seeing, and a similar situation. So in the blue dot, we see 2022 bottom orthophosphate. And then the triangle, the upside down triangle, shows the total phosphorus on the surface. And we're seeing that as bottom orthophosphate increases, it does not have an impact on the surface water quality. What we're looking at here are lake levels. So each year, lake levels are monitored for each of the lakes throughout the district. And this is just one conclusion. Something that we noticed is that early on in the season, Little Comfort Lake had observed possible reverse flow from Comfort Lake to Little Comfort Lake in early spring. So this is potentially impacting Little Comfort Lake. This is showing, so this year chloride was monitored in each of the lakes that had internal loading monitored. So for all 6 of these lakes, and I guess Forest Lake Middle and Forest Lake East basin, we're seeing that none of the lakes are all of the lakes are below the state standard of 230 milligrams per liter. So now we're going to move on to the stream legacy sites. So these are, as a reminder, these looking at the big picture across the district, what improvements are we seeing in the lake management districts? So to start with, as we said before, it was a very dry season, and so there were not very many samples collected, which impacted the analysis that we could do for these sites. But overall, some of the key takeaways were that chloride for all of the sites that we got water quality data for, chloride remained below state standards. Nitrate concentrations remained very low. And then another thing to note is that TSS and total phosphorus were variable across the sites, and this could potentially be, total phosphorus and TSS could potentially be impacted by low flows in wetlands, similar to what internal loading would do. Another thing to note is that there were reduced stream flows due to the dry conditions, and so this resulted in reduced loads in the downstream water.
Rosie, can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Back to that chart where you were just on with the, I noticed that Forest Lake Outlet shows a 422,000 pounds of sediment. That's a lot of sediment. So I'm wondering, how is that measured in the sample by how much sediments in each sample you take, and then you just project that out, or how is that number determined?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So I will maybe let Trevor answer that. But first, I just want to note that these samples, one of the things that possibly is happening here is that there's a lot of impact from the impervious stormwater runoff instead of just looking at what's coming out of Forest Lake. And so that could have potentially impacted the TSS concentrations in those samples. Trevor, is there anything else you'd like to add about that?
Yeah, and then also it's important to note that looking at the flow volume, Forest Lake Outlet, it has twice the flow volume of Bone Lake Outlet. So that's why it looks so much higher for the load. It's just that there's more volume flowing out of Forest Lake Outlet than Bone Lake Outlet. The concentrations are about the same as Bone Lake Outlet there. Yeah, and as Rosie mentioned, there's like there's a road near the monitoring site, and we're thinking that we're collecting some of that runoff, and that's kind of altering the flow out of the lake there, at least the concentrations.
When you say, aren't you sampling it right? Are you sampling above the weir or below the weir when you take those samples?
It's below the weir.
Okay, but then stormwater would only come in through, I mean, there's no stormwater that runs directly into that channel, is there? Is that what you're referencing, or are you referencing just the normal stormwater that goes into the lake at all different locations?
At that channel. Oh, go ahead.
I can speak to that, Manager Smeltz. There is a storm drain that enters right into that culvert. So it is possible that we're getting some of the
Okay.
runoff, capturing some of the runoff from the roadway right there.
Yeah, because that's like 20 tons. That's a lot of material.
And it's
Just
all
can't
headed
you
toward-
can't envision that much stuff going down and not being able to see it build up in the stream or something like that, or on the edges. That's the only thing that just kind of astonishes me. I don't know how many truckloads that is, but it's a lot of stuff. So I just thought it was interesting. And same with Bone Lake. Bone Lake's not that very large. So, but okay, thank you.
I just wanted to comment that that's all headed toward Comfort.
I know, Manager Anderson. That's why I asked the question, Manager Anderson, because
Yes,
I
yes.
knew you were going to ask it if I didn't. So interesting. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions before I move on?
Yes, can I have a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's very interesting when you say that about Comfort and just carrying on. I live fairly close to the inlet to the Sunrise River. And I've been here almost 20 years. And this spring, it is the highest flowage, the highest water level we've ever had as of today. It came up 6 inches just today. And the only other time we had an issue was when they were doing a lot of work and drainage up by Forest Lake with putting in Walgreens and after the Walmart and everything. And now I know they're doing work on Highway 61. And I don't know if this is a appropriate time for the question, but the flowage, we are at the highest watermark in 20 years, I believe, as of today on Comfort Lake. And I know we've had a lot of melting, but I don't see others getting that high.
Okay, so you're collaborating with what the data shows then, basically, is what you're saying. Is this Jack?
This is
Did you-
Al.
Oh, Al, okay. I don't see you on the list. That's why I was wondering.
President Schmaltz.
I'm sorry, I may not have signed up. I just joined in.
Okay, thank you.
The President Schmaltz.
Yes,
Yeah, on Moody here, we're probably the highest it's ever been, except for the 1 year when we had the beaver dam that was blocking the outflow. The water is within about 15 feet of the foundation of my barn right now. It's really high down here too.
okay, thanks, Doug. Well, we had the max snow it's a record year for snow, so that makes a lot of sense, I guess.
Mhm.
Manager Schmaltz, Manager Baki.
Yeah, go ahead, Manager Baki.
Yeah, we're really high on Bone Lake as well. I mean, it's the highest I've ever seen it in the 10 years that I've lived here. And other people who have lived here longer have commented that as well. And I just want to thank Blaine and the staff for taking time to make sure the outlet is cleared out.
Mhm.
I sent an email earlier to Mike and to Blaine, and they got back to me explaining they've been keeping an eye on things to keep things flowing. So I think we're all dealing with this high water right now.
Thank you, Manager Baki. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. Rosa, you want to go back to your presentation? Thank you.
No worries at all. All right, so just moving on to some other takeaways from these long-term monitoring sites. Just first of all, blockages and tailwater issues were particularly challenging in 2022. And when I say tailwater, I mean that as the lake levels rise, it can sort of back up into the stream channel. And so it can have an impact on the rate at which the water is flowing. In terms of blockages, you can see the observed stage. This is Little Comfort, the Little Comfort Inlet, sorry. And so when a blockage occurs, what this is showing is how the water levels rise. They rose about 1.5 feet. And then that blockage was removed and it immediately drops, as you can see there. And so these other figures to the right just show how these blockages are represented and noted, along with the provisional flows that we have to account for when these blockages occur, because it would basically calculate a very large discharge at that point in time if we don't fix those flows. And so those were an issue this year. Diagnostic monitoring takeaways. So once again, we monitored the Comfort Lake Management District this year. This table shows the volumes at the different diagnostic sites, which were much more relevant for this year's conclusions due to the limited water quality data. So first of all, starting with County Line Ditch, and so I'm just going to show where that's located. So the difference between County Line Ditch and Sunrise on 256 tell us that there's potentially a large volume of water being removed due to evapotranspiration. And so you can see that it's going through a very large wetland complex, and that possibly is the cause of that. Secondly, the Himes drainage area. This outlet doesn't discharge very often, and therefore its annual runoff volume is limited. However, when there is discharge, pollutant concentrations are quite high. So the Sunrise Wetland Project is intended to capture some of the pollutants to the Himes Lake from the Himes Lake drainage area. And then lastly, so during dry years, the ditch formerly known as JD2 likely contributes a higher percentage of runoff and potentially pollutant loads due to the higher percentage of impervious area compared to other drainage areas. So you can see where that site is located, and the drainage area is coming from this city of Forest Lake.
You could, if I could just comment on that area, you could really see that backup as the, well, I came back after I was on vacation and I came back after the big storm, but there was still frost. The water had seeped outside of the channel. And so you could see very easily through that layer of ice how far backed up that water was in this whole area, Bixby Park, as well as the area to the north. And so it was really, really backed up.
Jackie, when did you observe that?
That would have been the 6th and 7th of April when I returned from Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments on this slide? All right, so lastly, the effectiveness monitoring takeaways. So this year, 2 effectiveness projects were monitored. So one was the Broadway Avenue Iron Enhanced Sand Filter, and the second was the Castlewood Agricultural BMP improvement. So overall, the monitoring this year led to the following recommendations. So for the Iron Enhanced Sand Filter, replacing that filter bed for the Iron Enhanced Sand Filter in conjunction with the future proposed modifications by the city of that basin. And then the second, so for the Castlewood agricultural field, we're recommending a field assessment by district staff in 2023, just to evaluate the establishment of vegetation in that field. There were really high TSS concentrations, and so we're just wondering if the vegetation has been established for that prairie planting.
That looks pretty muddy in that picture.
Yeah, well, early on in the season, the concentrations weren't so bad. It was really later on in the season when there were much lower flows, and so that potentially could be the reason for that.
Okay.
So overall, the general monitoring takeaways. So first of all, water quality trends in the lakes are quite good. They're below the state standards, and so that's a positive thing. The 2022 drought-like conditions did result in potentially reduced external loads to the lakes. So that's also positive. And then another thing to note is that the planned projects such as that Forest Lake alum treatment and the Sunrise wetland project are targeting key problem areas. Thank you very much. And now I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Rosie. Are there any questions?
I just have,
Small.
oh, okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Manager Anderson. I can wait.
I just had a question about our visitor, Al. If you could get his full name and his address, that would be important for the record. I'd like to follow up with him.
Al, are you still there?
Al Anderson, and I'm 25819 West Comfort Drive.
Okay.
And I was just wondering and again, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but it was very interesting seeing the flowage and the blockage. And I know there's a beaver dam between Big Comfort and the Viking Boulevard. So I was wondering if that was noted or if that had any effect on the flowage coming out of Big Comfort.
Mike, can you address that, or staff, or we probably don't know?
I can speak to it a little bit. Yeah, I did not canoe or wade that entire reach, but we do have a monitoring location near Viking Boulevard there, and I did notice some beaver activity, and it looked like folks had maybe taken matters into their own hand and removed that beaver dam periodically throughout the season. So I'm not sure the extent that it was backing up water, but there is some, like you're saying, some known beaver activity in that area.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, Manager Schmaltz, Mr. Taves.
Yes, Manager Baki, go ahead. I forgot, sorry.
Yes, is that okay, Manager Taves, if I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Rosie, I appreciate the report. It's very complete. I enjoyed reading through it. Lots of good details, and I do realize it is a draft. So I assume it's a work in progress, but I have a question about the chloride measurements. It appears that it began in 2021, but nothing was reported because the data couldn't be verified. And what we are seeing in the report is from 2022. And as I looked through the report, I noticed there was data for Moody, Shields, Little Comfort, and Forest Lake, but nothing for Bone Lake. Do you know if Bone Lake has data on the chloride?
Yeah, I can comment on that and maybe Blaine too, but so basically the chloride is only collected for lakes that have profile monitoring. And so this is if an alum treatment is planned or an alum treatment has already been conducted. And so that's why it wasn't available for that lake, but I'm not sure what the plan is in the future. I don't know if there will be plans to monitor chloride, but Blaine, I'll let you answer that.
Sure. Thanks, Rosie. She's completely correct on that. We do, however, do a profile for our winter monitoring. So we will have that data included in next year's report, our winter monitoring data. And I can just say I haven't crunched any of the data or anything, looked at it that closely recently, but Bone Lake was always well below the state standard. All of our lakes were for chlorides this winter. So that puts your mind at ease at all.
Well, it's a question that does come up, and it's just one of those areas where people are asking questions about chloride. So yeah, if there's a way we can include that data somewhere, whether it's in this report or elsewhere, I think that would be helpful. Thanks.
So Manager Taves, go ahead.
Yeah, it was same line of questioning. Rosie, you mentioned what the state standard is for chloride. I missed it. Could you say that again, please?
Let me just make sure I'm correct. I believe it's 230 milligrams per liter.
Correct, yeah.
230. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Manager Taves. Any other questions? If not, thanks again, Rosie, for your report and for the EOR support of this whole thing. Just again, remind everybody, we have till April 19th if you want to make any other comments or suggestions. So this report can be modified if required and brought back at our next April 27th meeting for final approval. Okay, thank you. Moving on. The next item is the 2023 water monitoring scope of work. And this actually requires two action items. The first action item is a motion to approve the 2023 monitoring plan. And the second motion is to authorize the projected funds to support that work for this year. So before we get into discussion and presentation, let's make those motions now and get them seconded so that we can go into discussion as we talk. So that's on page 4. If you need to read the motion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a small note, you would need to do the motions one at a time. Act on the first before you move on to the second.
Fine, thank you, Council. Let's do it that way. Let's do motion number 1. In fact, I'll make motion number 1. I move to approve the 2023 monitoring plan as presented in this memo. And now we need a second.
I will second that.
Thank you, Manager Taves. So let's open up for the presentation then. Mike, are you going to introduce this, or is Cecilio?
I can take the lead if you'd like.
Go ahead.
Mr. President, managers, just wanted to present to you the 2023 monitoring plan. It's similar to past years and will include many monitoring elements, those being our long-term stream monitoring, which is our ISCO sites throughout the watershed. Got our lake monitoring program using the CAMP program and protocol. That'll be looking at all 3 basins of Forest Lake, Comfort, Bone, Shields, Moody, School, Little Comfort, Keewatin, Elwell, Third, and Twin Lakes. Got camp volunteers on several of these lakes, and then staff will be monitoring the remaining. We'll also be collecting dissolved oxygen and temperature profiles, as well as bottom water on any of the lakes that we've got continuing questions on internal loading. That includes Moody and Shields, Comfort, Little Comfort, and Forest Basins 2 and 3. We'll also be collecting some additional water samples at kind of the convergence of the hypolimnion and metalimnion to see if we're getting any of the internal loading is coming through the thermocline up to the top water. That'll be occurring in Little Comfort and then Forest Basins 2 and 3. We're not proposing that in Basin 1 on Forest Lake, as this is a shallow basin that's relatively well mixed. It normally doesn't stratify, and therefore the bottom water doesn't go anoxic, releasing phosphorus. So we're not proposing it there. Our CAP program, as I mentioned earlier, will be focusing on Forest Lake and hopefully expanding into all 3 basins, being led by Jess Hall, our Green Corps member, and she's been doing a great job rallying volunteers. We've got our DIY program, again, transitioning over to the Comfort Lake direct drainages, and then again, focusing on the county line subshed. We're also proposing some additional TSS monitoring throughout the district to get an idea if these degraded wetlands or ditched wetlands are contributing any sedimentation downstream. You'll note in the plan that we're not doing any diagnostic monitoring this year. So last year's diagnostic monitoring of the Comfort Lake Management District was the last in our rotation. We're now taking a few years off, getting a few projects implemented, and then we'll start the diagnostic monitoring rotation up once again. In addition, there's no effectiveness monitoring this year. That'll start up again next year after the Sunrise River Highway 61 wetland project and the CR50 iron enhanced sand filter come fully online and have a year to grow in. So EOR will be taking the lead on the long-term stream monitoring and also the 2023 monitoring report. And that information is included in their scope of work that is attached to this agenda item. District staff will lead all other efforts, and the total cost for these efforts is $70,877. This is excluding district staff time. And the EOR's component will be $53,775, which again is reflected in the scope.
Thank you, Blaine. Are there any questions, comments?
Manager Schmaltz, Manager Baki.
Go ahead, Manager Baki.
I'm just wondering, the stream monitoring appears, as we look at the budget, the stream monitoring appears more costly than the lake monitoring. I'm just curious as to why that is.
So the lake monitoring is implemented by staff and volunteers, so there's considerable savings there. It's also through Met Council, so we get good pricing on our lab analysis that way. The stream monitoring, district staff is helping out, but it's being led by EOR. That includes a bunch of discharge monitoring as well. So it's many field trips out into the area to get a good ratings curve to determine the actual loading that's coming from those areas. So it's a much more of an effort in regard to that and relying on our consultant for that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments before we take a vote on the first motion? Blaine, I do have one question. You did answer my questions about excluding Forest Lake 1 from the dissolved oxygen, the hyperluminant water samples. I understand that now, but I thought that you did in the presentation mention that Third Lake was included in the lake monitoring program, but it's the motion does not include Lake 3.
Oh, so that's
first paragraph of page 2.
So that's Third Lake, not Forest Lake, Third Lake. Is that where we're getting hung up? It's the small Third Lake.
North of, or yeah, it would be, was east, I suppose, of Bone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Chisago County.
So yeah, I always get that mixed up in my mind as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I'm still not clear. You say, I'm talking about the first sentence under monitoring summary where you say that the first and second basins of Forest Lake will be included.
So that's for, oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So that those basins have camp volunteers. So they'll be included in the official camp program. Staff is doing the remaining monitoring on the other lakes, still using the camp protocol, but it's technically not camp program because it's not volunteer based.
Is there any particular reason for that? Because in past years, we used to have a volunteer up there.
We did, they did not want to participate any further and we haven't found a volunteer
Okay.
as of yet.
Okay, good. Well, I misunderstood that, so thank you, Blaine.
Sorry.
I just
for
wanted
that.
to make sure we didn't leave them out because that's a key lake for
Sure.
us, basin, of course, right?
Definitely.
Okay, so any other questions? If not, last question, any other comments or questions before we take a vote? Okay, hearing none, Bobby, can you do a roll call vote for the motion, the first motion we made?
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye. Whoops.
Okay, motion carries then. So we now need a motion for, to approve the dollars to support the program for next year. So if someone could read that motion, please. It's on page 4.
I'll make the motion to authorize an administrator on advice of council to enter into an agreement with EOR to complete tasks 1 and 2 as in accordance with the 4-04-2023 scope of work and in an amount not to exceed $53,757.
Thank you, Manager Loth. Anybody, can someone second that?
I'll
I will
second.
second.
Oops.
Okay, we'll give that one to Manager Anderson. So that's seconded. Any discussion or questions? Or does EOR need to make a brief presentation on this, or can we just move to a vote? Sounds like we're okay with it, so why don't we just move to a vote? Bobby, could you do the roll call vote?
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. So the next topic is item D, 3D, the 2022 progress summary presentation. And this is basically a discussion item.
Thank you, Mr. President, managers. I have a brief presentation that I can do, and I will share my screen. So just by way of introduction, I have a pretty brief presentation here. As you all are well aware, the district has a lot of programs and projects ongoing and has been able to accomplish a lot over the years. Obviously, I can't cover that all today. So this presentation here is focusing on nutrient impairments and impaired waters delistings for impaired lakes, and then one forest lake, which has been kind of close but not listed. Going to try to cut right to the chase of the data there, and then we can have time for questions afterward. And just note too that we're planning to do more presentations in the future as we get closer to actually delisting and making such great progress toward our water quality goals. And we'll be tailoring those presentations to the different audiences and kind of making sure that we're providing, whether it's more background information on the impairments, the district's diagnostic targeting process, the portfolio of projects the district has completed, and all of the various programs the district has to offer, from AIS, permitting, education and outreach to cost share. We'll touch on those later, but I'm trying to keep it brief here. So just a very quick, what do we mean when we're talking about meeting goals and state standards in our lakes? Obviously, that's cleaner, clearer water. I know one comparison that's been used is having that greater clarity means something like seeing your toes in chest deep water, or even deeper in some cases, having less frequent and less severe algae blooms, and just generally having a healthier, thriving lake ecosystem. And that includes a healthy native plant community and a thriving game fish population. And so I'm going to be showing some data tables and some charts in the following slides, just to provide a little more context of what we're talking about. we talk about phosphorus a lot. This is obviously a nutrient that's naturally occurring, but in excess, it feeds that algae, and in excess, it can create those excess algae blooms. And so on this chart here, you might have seen this, it's been in our monitoring reports. We've got a scale from 3 all the way up to 150, and feels like has even been above these scales, this scale here in the past years. But shallow lakes, we're looking at about 60 micrograms per liter is our kind of is the state standard for phosphorus concentration in a shallow lake. It's 40 for most deep lakes like Forest, Comfort, and Bone. And then kind of at the lower end of the spectrum, like around the 15 mark, that's about where Lake Keewatin is. So kind of somewhere in this range is where we're aiming, depending on the lake. And obviously, more turbid with the higher phosphorus concentrations and more clear with the lower ones. And we also measure chlorophyll A, which is kind of that measure of algae, SECI, which is clarity, total suspended solids, which we talked about in the streams, kind of a indicator of land use in the surrounding watershed, and a number of other things, chlorides and whatnot. But with respect to water quality, these are kind of our focus. And so we've had these impaired lakes for years, and it's exciting really to start getting close to really looking at what that delisting process entails. And so there's some very specific data that you need to provide to the Pollution Control Agency. They're going to look at your water quality samples, number one, and that's having meeting the phosphorus standard and either chlorophyll or SECI samples. And they're also going to look at, the water quality trends, mainly that phosphorus trend, and also considering if there's management activities in the watershed. So all these capital improvement projects that the district has been doing, that factors into the PCA's decision as well. And noted here, when we talk about the trends, when it says significantly improving or declining, that means it's statistically significant. And so the following tables are going to show orange cells in the tables are cells that are not meeting the state standard for that lake. Blue means that it's meeting the state standard. So just kind of generally looking as we go over the years from left to right, going from more orange samples above the state standard to having more blue as we've implemented projects and made water quality improvements. And so these are the kind of things that we're going to show to the Pollution Control Agency. And this is really our body of work that we can demonstrate this lake's ready for delisting. So starting with Little Comfort Lake, this one is not quite meeting those standards, but it's definitely getting close, and we're seeing improvements over time. And we're definitely planning to do more projects. So you can see since the most recent 10 years, since 2013, there's always going to be seasonal variability, but we've actually been below the state standard for SECI and chlorophyll in the last 2 years, and below the state standard just in the last year for 2022. And we've got a significantly improving trend for phosphorus, and just generally kind of visually looking at the phosphorus concentration over the summer has been generally going down over the years. So the bottom line on this one is it's not quite meeting that phosphorus concentration there, but we've got other ongoing projects in that watershed, and that should get us there. Moving on to Moody Lake, this was a highly impaired lake. It had phosphorus concentrations exceeding 120 micrograms per liter. We had done a lot of projects around that lake and ultimately an alum treatment. We still have a few more kind of our capstone projects going on in that sub-watershed, which will help protect that alum treatment. One, of course, being on Manager Taves' property there, which we're very thankful for. And so we've been continuing to monitor, and we can really see just vast improvements in that water quality, but it's still not quite meeting the state standard for SECI or chlorophyll A. And so what we're going to do is finish those capstone projects and just continue monitoring. And we just kind of need more years of data post alum treatment to really record those water quality improvements that the district has done. Moving on to Shields Lake. Shields Lake is kind of a similar story to Moody. It was really, really impaired in past years, and the district did a few projects, a big stormwater reuse project, and then that alum treatment. You could see over time, it was over 300 micrograms per liter in the past, and it has just drastically gone down. And just by the measure of the data, technically, it's meeting the phosphorus concentrations in the last 2 years. It's meeting SECI and chlorophyll. It's a significantly improving trend. We've got the management practices in place. This one technically would qualify for delisting if we wanted to go through with it. But again, kind of like Moody, we'd feel more comfortable having a more years of monitoring data under our belts to show that it's really maintaining those improvements, especially for a shallow lake like Shields Lake, where that water quality can flip. And so probably will be ready for delisting soon, but we're going to continue to do monitoring. Comfort Lake is the lake. It's at the bottom of the watershed. It receives everything from the watershed district, and that lake has been impaired, and it's been, the watershed district has done some projects all throughout the entire watershed district, which results in improvements, and then some more targeted projects in the Comfort Lake Management District itself. The most recent one, of course, being that Sunrise River wetland restoration along Highway 61. And the recent data is showing actually really good water quality. It's meeting the phosphorus concentration, it's meeting SECI and chlorophyll, and has been for some years now. It's not a significantly improving trend, but an improving trend for quite a while, and really shows that it's below the state standard. So this, like Shields, this one could technically qualify for delisting, but we know that we've still got a few projects in progress here elsewhere in the watershed. And so we'd recommend just holding off and continuing to monitor, continuing to do our projects. And this one should be ready for delisting in the future. And then finally, Bone Lake. This is one where, like Comfort Lake, it's been meeting that state standard for a while. It's got a significantly improving trend in phosphorus for a while. It's meeting the standard for the most recent 2 years of summer average phosphorus. And your average is also looking really good. And it's meeting for SECI and chlorophyll as well. There's still going to be some seasonal variability that exceeds the standard, but what the Pollution Control Agency is going to look at is those averages overall. And so there's the trends, and then we've got management practices in place. Everything we've done for Moody Lake has been addressing that source of loading. We've done a number of wetland restoration projects in the Bone Lake sub-watershed. And there's been a lot of agricultural best management practices going on in that sub-watershed as well. So given all the management practices in place for Bone Lake, the fact that it's according to all of Pollution Control Agency's metrics, we would actually say this one is a pretty good candidate to be first on our list to start delisting. And so I actually have, starting last year, started conversations with Pollution Control Agency staff that are in charge of delisting. And so they've looked at all these charts and kind of helped develop them in the format that you're seeing now. And when we just asked them, what do you think about how Bone Lake looks? And they said, yes, we agree, based on the data that you're showing, that would qualify for delisting. And you can initiate that process if you would like. Once we would need to get the monitoring data uploaded into the state's online system. It's called Equus, which EOR is doing for us. But it would be a really good candidate, and we'll make sure that we provide that data to PCA, and it's a whole process still to go through the delisting. The staff will review it, they'll hold subcommittee meetings, and it'll at least be a few months of a process. This will be our first time going through this, but yeah, it's kind of exciting. This one, it does qualify. I have one final slide about Forest Lake, and then we'll conclude the presentation. So Forest Lake is not actually impaired. Our projects are protecting it against becoming impaired, because occasionally you'll see, like in this chart, those phosphorus readings will occasionally exceed that state standard, but it hasn't been enough to actually list it. And so we've got a few more projects. We've got a lot of projects in place in that watershed, such as the most recent one, that iron enhanced sand filter near County Road 50. And then, of course, the alum treatment slated for this fall is really going to address that internal loading. And so we're on a good track for Forest Lake to keep it from becoming impaired. And so that concludes my presentation, and I'll stop sharing. I can pull slides back up if anybody wants, or if there's any questions.
Any questions from the board?
Manager Schmaltz, Manager Baki.
Go ahead, Manager Baki.
Emily, this is a really great report. I really like the information, especially that last page where it shows the Clean Water Grant Fund awards and who's been receiving the money, which is good to see that we're at the top of that list. Is this the report that is required by Minnesota statutes?
That's a good question, Manager Baki. So the annual report is what is required by statute on an annual basis, and you have to have like your audit in there, your list of board managers and all that stuff. The progress report, there is one piece of statute that relates to that. It says every 2 years, a watershed district must evaluate its progress toward goals and if it's making progress towards its watershed management plan goals. So that's the one piece of statute. It's the really big one in the rules is our annual report, and this progress report is kind of a separate one.
So the audience for this report would be simply the state, or is this report used for other purposes too?
It certainly checks a box for the state. I would say that ourselves are more the primary audience for it. It gets sent to the state. I haven't really ever received feedback on it, but I think that's just kind of been Comfort Lake Forest Lake has been really focused on the metrics and evaluating progress toward goals. And it's kind of our compass, so to speak. So I would say that, you know, the board here and our staff and our team is the main target audience.
Yeah, it'd be really delightful to share this beyond that, because it's such a complete report, and it certainly builds the case for the purpose and reason for being of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. And it's a really great report.
I just wanted to add that it is meant for our citizens to easily understand what we're doing and the results of the work that we've been doing. So it's always better in graphs when you're talking about technical stuff. So it is something, I don't know that too many of them actually access it, but it is a quick read. It's not like going through pages and pages of text to get to the answers. So it had that purpose in mind as well when we started.
Yeah, as we build awareness here and try to increase our awareness over the next couple of years, I think a document like this can really be effective in not only, as I say, showing what we've been able to accomplish, but also helping to educate the public. As Manager Anderson pointed out, it's a very simple layman's type approach to it. So I think it's a wonderful report. The only question I have is that, you know, we do have other things that we work on, and that's shown as it's referenced on this report. It is pointing out that we do permitting, we do AIS programs, et cetera, that are equally important. This has been a major focus for us for the first 10 years. And so that's why it's getting all the attention. But we may want to mention, and it does this in the report a little bit on that one page, that just mention the fact that we have other programs that we are also reporting on, but not in this particular report. So I'll talk to Emily about including a little bit more. She's got a little background on that, but I think we might want to strengthen that position a little bit in case somebody comes away from looking at this saying that this is the only thing we work on as a watershed district. You know, permitting is important because it takes care of all the potential problems of decreasing water quality because of construction and land disturbances, and AIS the same way. It helps protect the water quality in many cases. So those are important things that we may want to mention also. So, but not in a lot of depth.
Manager Schmaltz, President Schmaltz,
Yes.
Just a comment to that, I think a reference to our annual report, which would have all of those activities in it, would be important rather than maybe put some highlights in there, but as you mentioned, on a paragraph or so, but all of those other programs are talked about in our annual report. And it would be good to reference that as you're making these highlight statements, just to get people used to looking at that too.
No, and she does that. That's actually in the report as she laid it out, but it's only one sentence or so. So I'm just suggesting we try to beef that up by maybe a couple examples, that's all. And maybe even, so that would be the only change we'd want to make, because you don't want to detract from the report directly.
Exactly.
But you don't want people to come away from thinking that this is the only thing we really work on.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Manager Schmaltz,
Manager Baki, go ahead.
is it possible to get a copy of this report so that managers can use it to help promote the work of the watershed district?
This will be coming back next meeting to be finally approved. At that point in time, we can have copies made for everybody. Same way with the normal progress report and the annual report also. That'll be approved at that time also.
Wonderful, thank you.
So any other questions or comments? I think it's, again, very well done, Emily. Great work again. And Emily, I'll get back to you here before the weekend to make a couple suggestions, which you can consider with Mike then and decide what we want to do. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, Manager Schmaltz, or President
Manager
Schmaltz.
Taves, go ahead.
Yeah, after this is approved next week, we don't have a association here, but we do have a mailing list of people. I'd like to share this with the people around our lake, because Moody has made some really significant progress. And the way this data is laid out makes it really crystal clear. You don't have to be a technician to understand it.
No, I agree. It's really a wonderful job. So we can certainly do that. Yep.
Mr. President,
Yes.
managers,
Go ahead, Mike.
just a little bit to add on to some of the discussion. So while there is that component that Emily has described, you know, in my experience, no one at the state has ever asked for anything beyond the annual report. So I think that we are unique in actually putting together this. I'm not aware of another organization, a watershed district or SWCD, that puts together a progress report of this nature at all. And it was really, the first one we did is in 2015. It was just to kind of start looking at metrics kind of through this sort of a Lean Six Sigma approach, just overall of efficiencies and how do we, you know, just continually asking questions, how do we improve? And so if you were to go back and look at that first report, it was very simple. Emily has built on it significantly over the years, and it is, and I personally use it quite a bit, for quite frequently. I send it out to agency folks and policy folks, peers, others, as an example of the progress that we're making through our sequential diagnostic monitoring and other efforts, trying to demonstrate that this approach is getting us the results. Because many of us, when the DMDLs are first discussed, these were 30, 40, 75-year plans to get lakes back to the state standards. And we know that in our last watershed plan, a lot of the goals for many of the lakes, whether Comfort or Bone Lake, the goal was to get there by 2040. So we're a little ahead of progress because of the ongoing adaptive management and focus on data rather than a computer model. So just wanted to add that as well.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, if no other questions, then we'll move on. Again, nice job. It's great to see all the hard work pay off for us. So thank you. Next item is item 3E, hybrid board meeting option. And this requires an action step of actually moving towards a hybrid meeting approach and away from what we've been doing in the past here. So Mike, do you want to introduce this? And well, let's pass the motion first, or let's get the motion on the table. And then we'll have a presentation and discussion. The motion is on page 2, I believe, of that.
Okay, I will move to convene future meetings of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District Board in a hybrid format, starting with the May 11th, shall we say May 11th, 2023 regular board meeting.
Thank you, Manager Anderson, and I'll second that motion. And then we'll introduce Mike to make some comments on this, and we can then open it up to discussion.
Yes, Mr. President, managers, we know that the the federal government is planning to declare in May, even though there was another bill passed just the other day regarding the end of the pandemic, but there's another one that is to come into effect in that May 11th, I think is the actual date. So with that, then there really would seem to be no or not much standing for the board president to maintain this posture. And I think it would probably be called into question by some of our partners. So there are really two options, and the board can amend the motion if they want, but given the kind of limited space of the district office and the flexibility that we know that consultants appreciate, and we have one this evening, I think, where Jack Zabrowski is in La Crosse, and so this saves him a trip from driving up. So so we just think from a practical standpoint, the technology, we're familiar with it, but this is really kind of an ideal situation. So there would be limited staff and the board that would be in attendance going forward at that time. Board members can attend remotely, but then there's the additional requirement of posting their location, both in the for the meeting notice, but then also just the requirements of having their space available if they want to be in a position to vote on a particular item. And council can add anything additional to that if the board has any questions or discussion about that.
Okay, we'll open up for discussion. Any comments or questions or concerns?
President Schmalz, I had one.
Manager Lewis, go ahead.
Mike, I know you said that if a manager was attending remotely, it needed to be noticed in the meeting. Does that mean 1 week in advance that you would have to know that would be needed, or what's the requirement for noticing that a manager is going to be participating remotely?
Monday at 5 p.m. is the official notice of the posting of our meeting notice. So.
And I know Manager Bakke does a lot of vacationing, especially in the wintertime. So again, I mean, he could declare, if he's in Florida and it's always nice weather down there, right? Except if you're in Fort Lauderdale, but you could use his porch as a public area to invite people to come in if they wanted to attend the meeting, So I think we can get around this to a certain extent by following the guidelines. And the same way with Chris, if he's stuck at work or something and wants to vote, he could participate in his public facility that he works at. So I think there's ways of working around this and with the policy. I would also like to request that we try to do spacing of much as apart at the table. I'm not sure we can get 6 feet between us, but it's just better health principles in general, I think, by spreading out a little bit. And when everybody was wearing masks, I noticed there were a lot fewer colds and everything else going around. And now that people are back to normal, there's been several viruses floating around. I think Manager Anderson had one, I had one, so forth, So by just showing some good discretion in how we set up our meetings at the home base, it can help also in terms of preserving everyone's health. So just wanted to make that comment. Any other comments or thoughts? Manager Anderson, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about whether the Forest Lake City Hall would still be open for us. That has more room than we have.
Right. They have not changed their policy. So
which means what? They're not hosting outside events? Or?
Correct. They're not letting outside entities use the chambers. I mean, we could, revisit that at some point in the future again, but.
Yeah, I think we should have a couple of meetings, and then I would like to pursue that with the mayor, because that's a public building, and we're not just any partner, we're an LGU. And if they want us to build a $3 million office building so we can have a larger meeting space, I'm not so sure would think that's the best idea, just to get some extra space. So But let's just start off with with doing best we can. And then after we try it out, if we feel we need to get that space back. I think it was also nice to have extra space, but it also gave you some benefit of the whole atmosphere of the meeting, made it more formal, et cetera, I think, which was good when people were coming to the meetings.
Yes.
But now they're not going to be coming because do they allow people coming to the meetings now, Mike, or do they have, everybody has to participate remotely if you're going to be at the city hall meeting?
I believe that they've opened those meetings up.
They have, okay.
Yeah.
So that's another reason to have it there. I think it's a little bit more formal environment than our little office area.
It also has the technology to run an efficient meeting. Microphones, they're already in place, the ability to tape, video as well as audio of the meetings is
Right.
there. Mhm.
The new technology that we're planning to adopt is we've used that. Actually, they have it in their main conference room, and so we've been able to participate in meetings in there. It's quite good. I think you'll be impressed with the quality of the recordings that we're going to get through the Zoom, and its ability to. It's called OWL. So, but anytime anybody moves or speaks, it'll automatically focus on those individuals rather than having one camera up on a TV and being somewhat, indifferent as to who, being able to determine who's speaking.
Yeah, that's nice.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we take a vote?
Manager Schmaltz.
Yes, go ahead, Manager Baki.
As I recall, Mr. Kinney had gathered data on our online meetings and how we were actually having more participation through online than we were with in-person meetings. And as the fact that we are a data-driven organization is something that we should be looking at closely before we make changes. And I understand we have to follow open meeting law, but it's still not clear to me where we're meeting and when we are meeting and when we're making this change. Would this be for our next meeting or in sometime in the future?
May 11th.
May 11th, Manager Baki.
It's in the motion to start on May 11th.
Thank you.
Well,
And again, we can try to move back to the city hall also if we have to, but it's more efficient for our vendors also. They don't have to come to the meetings. They can participate remotely, which is a bit benefit to them in terms of saving time and money too. So to a certain extent.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
regarding Manager Baki's comment about the public, regardless of your meeting format, you can always continue to provide technology for members of the public to attend remotely. You need to allow them to come in person if they choose, but you can also provide that connection and they can certainly attend remotely.
Thank you, Council. Any other questions or comments? Okay, with that then, Bobby, could you then do a roll call vote?
Manager Baki,
Nay.
Manager Loaf,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye. Oh, where's that coming from?
I've got someone who's shooting. They're practicing with their gun. Is that what you're hearing?
No, I'm hearing
No, it's
it.
like an echo. Like she has a sister sitting next to her.
It's a male voice though.
Is it?
Yes, on my end it is.
Huh.
Anyway,
Okay, well, motion carries. Thank you. Again, since the motion carried, I should really, as president, revoke the March 2020 emergency declaration that we made earlier, which allows us then to go to the May 11th hybrid meeting.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Council again.
Council Holtman.
If that's your inclination, it wouldn't be a bad idea for there to be a board motion simply supporting your withdrawal of that declaration?
Okay, I'll make a motion then.
Mr. President, I'll recommend that we do it at the next board meeting. Otherwise, we'll be meeting in person next month, the next board meeting, if you remove it now.
Good point. Well, in the motion though, well, we did say starting with May 11th in the first motion though. Doesn't that cover it?
If it's a good point, Mr. Administrator, though I think the motion is just to give President Schmaltz the basis of board support, and then it's up to President Schmaltz to actually withdraw the declaration, which he can do, or time in accordance with what the return to the hybrid approach.
Thank you for that clarification.
So you want me to make a motion then to withdraw the emergency declaration?
No, Mr. President, it would just be a motion supporting the president's decision to withdraw that declaration.
Okay, somebody else should make that motion then.
I'll make the motion that Chuck just stated. Word
Thank you,
for word.
Manager Anderson, and I'll second that motion. Bobby, do you want to do a roll call?
Manager Baki,
I will abstain.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next item is item F, the Shoreline Partnership Grant Letter of Support. And this also is an action item. So Mike, you want to introduce this?
Yes, Mr. President, managers, I just want to bring this to the board because even though we don't know what the dollar amount and what the district may or may not be able to access, but we've been working with the DNR. We have this, well, Beth has been the principal individual working with this shoreline committee. The DNR and Jeff Forrester from the Lakes and Rivers Association. So they're looking for a letter of support, and we thought it appropriate that the district would provide that, and I wanted the board's blessing, so to speak, and to submit that letter on behalf of the district.
Thank you, Mike. I'm glad to see we're doing this. It could be a very strong source of funding for us if we were able to find a good fit here. So could someone please make the motion as recommended in the bottom of the topic email?
I'll make the motion to authorize the administrator to submit a letter of support.
You want to read the rest of it?
On behalf of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District for the Natural Shoreline Partnership.
Thank you, Manager Taves. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Discussion, questions? Okay, hearing none then, Bobby, let's do a roll call vote.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Next topic, old business, item A, ISG update and presentation.
Mr. President, managers, we have Jack Zabrowski here this evening from ISG. He has been working with Beth and I on this ongoing, I think, since last summer or so, late summer or so, early fall. Go ahead, Jack.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you for allowing me to present today. I'll share my screen, have a brief PowerPoint I can run through. Okay. Everybody see that? PowerPoint?
There
And
we
is the
go.
sound
We've got it
okay?
now.
Mhm.
Okay, great. And the sound okay? Everybody can hear?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm a senior planner from ISG. ISG is an architecture, engineering, planning, and environmental firm. Originally based out of Mankato, we have 11 offices with 500 employees. And we are assisting Comfort Lake, Forest Lake with the feasibility study. Today, I'm going to go over just a little bit of background, some purpose of the study, some needs that were identified, some initial results from a survey, a space analysis that we conducted, and share some other watershed facility examples. And then we'll talk about next steps. So as I'm sure you all know, the Bowser established this watershed district in 1999 in response to a citizen petition. I found it interesting that the petitioners included agricultural landowners and lakeshore owners. It was supported by the communities and county boards, and it is a special purpose unit of government. So the purpose, I just gave some background purposes of the Minnesota watershed, purpose of watersheds in general, to protect health and natural resources through land use planning, flood control projects, and other conservation projects using sound scientific principles. More specifically, the purpose of Comfort Lake is to protect and improve water resources through adaptive management and community education. So our feasibility study, the purpose of this study was to evaluate feasibility of a new facility within the Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District based upon communication, feedback, and support of the project, including a pro forma statement and site criteria. Some of the needs that were identified, the current building for the district has outgrown that facility. Current facility has been sold, and there's an uncertain future as to what will happen after new owner takes the wheel. And the district is being proactive and looking for new places to explore. Some of the other needs that were identified, outreach and education is a big part of what Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District does. And a space that can accommodate that is important to remember, to include that as the needs. So you can see here some of the outdoor events, maybe you've attended these indoor classroom events, and then just programming. So we have issued a survey. We're just in the preliminary phases yet. We don't have enough responses yet to call it a representative sample. So we're still working to promote that, but what we see so far is interesting and encouraging. One of the first questions was, how important is clean water to the quality of your life in your community? Well, respondents definitely agreed that water quality was very important to their quality of life. And they also thought that the watershed district is doing a really good job at preserving and improving water quality. So 9 out of 10 for the water to quality of life, and then almost 7 out of 10 for how the watershed district is doing. So that's encouraging. And this isn't all the survey, these are some just interesting results that I saw so far. The next question from the survey was ranking results, or ranking aspects of a Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District facility. So essentially what you'd like to see in a facility, and the higher numbers are more preferred. So the most important was meeting space for public use, which you were just talking about a moment ago. Interactive educational installations for children and adults, mix of indoor and outdoor educational experiences. And fourth place was maintaining the lowest possible cost. So an interesting dichotomy there, but nonetheless, we see some priorities starting to emerge, and these will become more and more clear as we get more data. The next question, or one of the questions was, which option below would you prefer for a Comfort Lake, Forest Lake facility? A new facility, a renovated facility, a renting an office space or storage space, and sharing an office space with another organization, or no opinion. So you can see that the new facility wasn't highly ranked or chosen. These aren't rankings, I should back up. These are just the number of responses. So that to these preferences. So the next thing we looked at was what the needs were for space. So in other words, how many offices were needed, how many drop-in workstations were needed, boardroom, education room, common workroom. And these were developed with the staff and our architectural staff. Some things that were not included in this space analysis, just so we're all clear, the district currently rents 2 storage units. So a 10 by 10 with file boxes, education, outreach materials, and then a 10 by 20 canoe and kayak monitoring equipment at another facility, which they commute to get the canoes or field work. They also store a motorboat off-site at the city parking lot. And then one thing that was not in this is just space for a parking lot, so. A couple other things were not included in the space analysis was indoor educational space and outdoor spaces. Many watershed districts have outdoor educational spaces, so we didn't have that as programming in the space analysis. So here is the space analysis. I know it's very small, and I think your district staff did share a copy of this with you, but essentially, this is the needs that were identified in that previous slide. And then these are the calculations around how many were needed and total square footage. And then this would give total square footage of the whole facility with a factor for wall and mechanical. So the total square feet is 5,782 is what we calculated for a new build. And I can zoom in on that if anybody wants to take a closer look at any of those, or if it's very small. I don't know if you can read it or not. But we can come back to that if anyone has any questions, or if there's anything now, or later too after the presentation. We'll see this again. I just wanted to share it with you now. So now I just wanted to share with you some, as we did our due diligence, we looked around at other watersheds, and this is some of the examples that came up that were nearby. The Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, it's got a new headquarters in Minneapolis. It's a redevelopment of a brownfield, and they applied best practices for brownfield remediation and ecological stormwater management. This is sort of an example of what you can do in a district that has many contaminated sites. They wanted to encourage people to take action and reclaim those brownfields and redevelop them. So this is an example of how you can do that. It's got the roof runoff is collected and stored to water trees. It's got rain gardens, and it connects to the Mississippi through trails and green spaces. And it's right in the Mississippi River. This is the Capital Region Watershed District headquarters. It's a refurbished building. I think it was like something like an auto parts or some sort of auto repair store before that. They put new cladding in the building, redid the landscaping. It includes a learning center, a pocket park, and interactive features designed to engage users. One, for example, this is a water feature right here that comes through the building. I think that maybe it's collecting roof rainwater. This one is the 9 Mile Creek Watershed. It's a unique educational facility. Visitors learn best practices in water management and conservation in the natural setting. And it's on 5.3 acres with walking trails and a wetland. Here's the Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District. Here's another demonstration project, shows stormwater management, green architecture, and uses Minnesota native plants. It does capture 100% of rainwater and snow melt, stops runoff from entering the streams and creeks. And it was 2.4 million for that. That seems on the low end, but that was a while ago. I think they built that. So here's some other facets of that development too. They have a green roof. They have some stormwater management and solar panels. So these are some repeating themes that we took from the survey about what people wanted to see in a facility, watershed district facility. Some of the comments were buildings are living bricks and mortar examples of possible bright future. So in other words, using this building to encourage people to think about a bright future and how to get there. It can also demonstrate concepts of sustainability. So we saw that solar, rain gardens, green roofs, permeable pavements, surfaces, native plants, of course, stormwater runoff prevention, connecting residents to nature and green space, and providing education on protection of water and natural resource conservation. So this is our process of what we've done so far, and then a little bit of the next steps. So we've reviewed the current plan documents, identified stakeholders, conducted interviews, conducted a needs assessment, conducted a space analysis. We have pro forma for the project, and community meeting space survey. We're still trying to promote that survey, get it out there, hoping for more responses. I think we'll probably use our first public engagement event to really promote that survey more on May 9th. So the next steps would be to, and this is up to the board if they'd like to take part in this or have this be part of the survey, but we can do a visioning for the board of directors to see kind of what direction they'd like to take with this facility. And if I can help facilitate that at all, that could be part of this whole process too. And then maybe I can bring some more robust data with a little bit more response to that. We have an engagement event on May 9th and June 15th. And we'll have a comparison in the final product of a new building and currently renting, price assessment for that. And then we'll identify a critical path for decision making, and we'll hopefully have a final report to you by June 30th. So in summary, a facility that educates the community and inspires staff is essential to the implementation of the administrative and programming aspects of the Comfort Lake Watershed District Plan. We came to that conclusion after reviewing the Watershed District Plan and the Forest Lake Comprehensive Plan. It seems like this building is necessary to execute their mission. And now I'll take any questions or review any of the data or anything else the board would like to discuss. Thank you for allowing me this time.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Questions from the board or comments?
President Schmaltz?
Yes, Manager Loth.
I know that one of them had the 2.6 million, which sounded like it was built in 2006, but I'd be curious to find out how the other buildings were funded or paid for and what the cost was in the years they were built, just to get a better idea of what we're dealing with here.
And that funding source for the Ramsey Washington was district funds. So the Watershed District used their own funding. I don't know if they got grant funding, but it said district funds in their summary. So I can probably find out a little bit more about those comparables. Let me take a note on that.
I'll also say that these buildings look amazing, I would say, compared to what we're working with, so.
Yeah, you know, there's even some more grand grand ones beyond this too that we kind of left out. So
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. President.
How did you select your samples, your samples?
Yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
the examples, the example buildings.
How did you select your people that you talked to?
For the interviews,
Yes,
staff generated a list of stakeholders and we just kind of went through and scheduled those.
okay. So these were people that probably are familiar with us already, or you just didn't go up and down the street and talk to every fifth person?
No, they're probably familiar with you already. Yeah, you're probably, your reference people for the staff. So, I mean, what we're trying to do is have interviews with people who are very engaged and very interested. And then we want to have, a survey just for the general public, and then open houses for people that would kind of be between those two ranges. So trying to capture people with many different techniques. So
Okay.
open houses, surveys, and interviews and focus groups.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And for the survey, we mailed the postcard to all 6,000 people in the district, 6,000 residents in the district. So the forest staff created that postcard.
Jack, we did not do it to the 6,000. We did a sample size of, I believe it was
15.
2,000.
Okay.
2,000.
Okay. That's right.
So what was the response rate on that?
It's been very small. We're continuing to push it out to partners. This is Beth. I apologize. We have not had a particularly good response to the survey, but there was an article in one of our papers. We've even paid to push it on our Facebook page. We've shared it with partners and stakeholders. I know Jessica is sending it out to the lake associations to go into their communications. I apologize, my lighting is bad. I wasn't planning on being on camera. So we have not had the response that we had hoped for. Jack and I spoke about that today, and we found that might even tell us something that people may not be as engaged about our building as we had thought they might be.
Well, I don't think they know us. We've done almost nothing really. We've kept our head down low and out of trouble the last 10 years. So I think that's to be expected. If you had people know you might have got a 5% response, but I'd be lucky if we get 2%. So.
Beth, when you were doing the selection of, did you say 3,000 cards that you mailed out? Or
we sent them out to 2,000 people, and it was randomly selected.
Okay, all right.
So that we were trying not to skew the results.
Right.
And so we picked we had a random sampling.
Okay. Okay. Good. Well, I wouldn't expect to have a big response, because we don't have a lot of people that come to our meetings ever. And a lot of people don't even know what a watershed district is. So, we have different opinions on the board or past boards about what we should be doing to educate people, but I was always one that supported making sure a story was out there, and there's some bad that comes with that, but there's more good. People understand what you are doing, why you were created, and what it's doing for the community. So we're working, I think, toward that kind of communication, and that's going to be helpful. Once people understand what we do, and that, it is tough to find a rental space in Forest Lake that's adequate for what we need to be doing. Back when we were 1 or 2 or 3 people, it wasn't a problem, but it's a real problem now. And so we don't have a lot of options here. And you can only utilize another government unit property, so much. You can't have access to it every day. So we need to tell that story. That's all I think about it. And
I agree 100%. If we move forward with this, we have to shift it in high gear and start coming out with a aggressive program to get ourselves known and to get our track record known.
exactly.
And then ask people for some money, I think, but that's something we have to work on. I had a question also. We had a number of sites that we've looked at over the years that might be possible sites for us. Either we have contacts or it's city property, or there's some natural resource on the site that we could leverage. We had talked about actually having you look at that and those sites and rank them and assess them for us. I don't think that's ever been done, has it, Mike? Do you recall? We should
No.
probably get that done as part of the next step too, because perhaps we could get the city to donate some land to us, for example. That would help offset some of the costs. But I think we should look at those sites and see what we've got and see if they're workable, et cetera.
Mhm.
Especially from a make a little, build a little type philosophy rather than building the Taj Mahal right away.
Manager Schmaltz.
Manager Baki, go ahead.
Yes, you mentioned the city. I'd like to keep it broader. The watershed district is bigger than the city of Forest Lake. That we should look at all areas within our boundaries of the watershed district. Keep that open as an idea, please.
Good, thank you, Manager Baki, I agree.
Well, I think at the last meeting, didn't you appoint Manager Baki and myself to this building, to another building committee?
Right, to go talk, first of all, to talk to our new owner to find out and we can talk about that after the meeting when you find out what is, part of that space is rental, so we could rent more space here if we needed it. And maybe we could convince him to put some garages up for us on the outside or something. That's
Well,
another option we could look at.
The reason I'm asking for that is that we're talking about the building portion of this bigger project. And if Manager Baki and I could work with Mr. Zabrowski and talk with him about what we've looked at in the past and make sure that he has that background information about the land areas that we've looked at, the buildings that we've looked at, either renovation or building new, so that he has a full story. And I'll meet with hopefully Manager Baki tomorrow. I've been on vacation, as I mentioned, since that last meeting. So we lost a little time there, but we can pick it up pretty good and I think get moving on it.
That'd be
Yeah, I
great.
think that's a good suggestion, and I think you need especially figure out what his plans are. Did the tenant leave because he raised the rent on him, or did they just decide to leave, so.
Mhm.
We need to
Okay.
know what his vision is for his building and whether we're
Yep.
part of that or not, so.
Yep.
That may accelerate our plans too.
Ms. Anderson, could I get contact information for you, or could you contact me, or what would that work best?
Yeah, let me meet with Manager Baki first, and we'll get a schedule set up, and then I'll be contacting you. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other thoughts?
President Schmaltz, this is Beth.
Yes, Beth.
I'm gonna leave my camera off just because I can't figure out what the problem is this evening. So one of the next steps that Jack highlighted was, not just the pro forma, but doing a comparison and doing just what you guys are saying is comparing the cost of renting someplace else, purchasing, and then looking at the real estate that we have available, and staff is hoping to support him in that effort. So any information that you have, that any of the board members have on available properties, trends, anything like that. We had an interagency coordination meeting with the city of Wyoming this week, and we even brought this up in discussion with them. So that is part of the next steps in completing that pro forma, is so that you feel like you are comparing apples to apples as much as possible.
Mhm. Well, Beth, I think you should probably be on this committee that I was just talking about as well. Are you the lead
I
Supervisor?
support, I
on the
support
project?
Administrator Kinney
Okay.
and so just do some liaison. So anything that I can do
Mhm.
to help you or Administrator Kinney, I'm happy to do.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair
Manager or manager, go ahead. Council Holtman, go ahead.
and Manager Anderson, just a small note, referencing back that you and Manager Baki, I believe simply were tasked to go and discuss with the current owner the circumstances and to generally develop information that would be useful to the process. It's not in the nature of a formal committee. It's just some information gathering and work that you're doing on behalf of the board. So you can proceed informally. I don't want you to think that you're proceeding, as a formal body.
Thank you. The work group that we were assigned to. Thank you.
So I thought of one other thing that I brought up before. One of the reasons we have limited rental opportunities here is because most of the nice buildings is out of our watershed district and in a different, so you should be aware of that, Jack. And then I had suggested a long time ago that why haven't we gone to Bowser and made an appeal to move 5 blocks out of our area where there's some nice buildings that we could get into perhaps, and to give them have them give us a waiver. But I don't know why we haven't done that. But I think it's something we should consider. I know, Mike, you have some reasons for that, and maybe they're good ones, but that's another option we should really pursue because we're hamstrung right now, stuck in the wrong side of the tracks, as they say, basically, so that's something else we should look at, I think, as an option. Any other thoughts? Okay, well, Jack, I think you've got a plan in place, so we're looking forward. I'm glad to see we can move as quickly as you're suggesting. I hope we can keep to that timetable. So whatever you need from us, let us know, and we'll try to help you keep on that schedule. With that, then, let's move on to the project update, number 5.
Yeah, Mr. President, managers, the plane is still on. He's intending to take this.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, managers, just have a brief project update similar to what we presented in the past. The main points here are that we're just waiting on some spring work for the Highway 61 wetland project and the CR50 iron enhanced sand filters. The planting will occur this spring as conditions allow, and then there's some additional punch list items to get those projects completed. Other than that, we don't have a whole lot to update. The substantial completion for both of those projects will be around mid-June. So at that time, we'll have all our final photos some new photos for those projects, and hopefully we've got some good green up and you can really see those projects come together. Happy to take any questions that if you might have any.
Any questions? Is there another topic, Blaine, or?
That's pretty much the update.
Okay.
Kind of just waiting on to get some feedback from the contractor on when they're going to plan on going out and completing the projects. They're close. I just got some, planting and some additional project elements that need to get completed.
It's pretty impressive when you look out and see that whole area change the way it's been changed. So I think a lot of people have noticed that, and a lot of curiosity about it. So that's good.
Yeah, that project should look real nice when it greens up.
Yeah. As of this morning, it looked like we should name another lake out there.
Water everywhere, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, no other questions. Let's move on then to summary and approval of board direction.
Mr. Chair, managers, I have very little. I have a request by Manager Baki that when chloride data is obtained for Bone Lake, that that be properly documented in the district's reporting. And then with respect to the progress report, Manager Baki encouraging that report be shared among residents and stakeholders. And then President Schmaltz noted that we should be sure in some concise way to communicate in there that there's a broader range of district activity. And I think that's really all that I noted.
Any other comments or suggestions on that? Okay, it sounds like we're all set. Any final comments from anybody else before we adjourn?
Steve, I just have one question. We were trying to set up a special meeting right before I went on vacation. Did that happen? I didn't see any memos on it after I got back. Where are we at with that?
Special meeting with respect to what, Manager Anderson?
I think it
It
was
was
to finalize Manager Kenny's review and goals for the year, something
I
like
think,
that.
yeah, I think it was basically to go over his objectives and to make sure that we're all comfortable with them. 'Cause
Okay,
you and we have met as a board, but we haven't shared that with Mike yet.
okay, all right.
So, and I
Yeah.
know we had some trouble scheduling that with travel schedules and all that. So Mike, could you maybe rekindle that for us again and see if we can't get together here?
Yes, Mr. President, managers. The other is the governance manual. So, and I do have,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I have a meeting with Eric Smetana. He was their Gallagher person tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And so then I wanted to check on his availability as well as a possible attendee. So,
Okay. Good.
thank you.
Thanks for bringing it up, Manager Anderson.
Mhm.
Time flies by, doesn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
President Schmaltz.
Okay. Yeah, Manager Lewis, go ahead.
I just had a real quick question. With respect to going to this hybrid model for our board meetings, what is the rule for these other types of meetings? Are those required to be in person, or can those continue as a fully remote option when we do these workshops and other training sessions?
I'm going to defer to Mike or to Council Holtman on that one. I think we can do work sessions and so forth, as long as it's not a fully public meeting. Mike, can you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm sure Chuck can add to it, but if it's a special meeting and there's an action to be taken, then I would presume it would fall under the current plan for our regular meetings in terms of attendance and posting, et cetera. A workshop that is strictly informational and no decision is going to be made. That might be a different category, but again, I'll let council validate that.
Mr. Chair, Manager Loth, any meeting at which district business is discussed that where there is at least 3 managers present, or any meeting of a committee of the board is an open meeting and needs to meet the statutory requirements.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Well, can't the follow-up session be considered a closed session if Manager Kinney wants it that way, since it is a personnel matter? We do that with salary and some other things.
There are certain meetings that may convene in closed session. And personnel evaluation is one of them. But the way the statute is written, you still need to notice it and convene under the open meeting law. And then you would convene in closed session and then return to open meeting in order to adjourn.
Which means we'd have to go to the hybrid format for that.
Yes.
Okay.
I would, there's something that the statute doesn't address. If there's a meeting that is entirely for closed session purposes, I would say that, so as an example, if a manager is not able to attend in person or be in a public place, that the rest of the board could convene, go into closed session. That manager could join the closed session discussion and then leave the meeting, and then the rest of the board could adjourn the meeting.
President Schmaltz,
Yes.
I didn't mean to get into the weeds on this question. I guess my overarching question was, or a request that, or the assumption that when staff sends out these surveys about availability, are we operating under the premise that these are going to be in-person meetings that we're either telling staff that we're either available for or not available for?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We should make that clear in the announcement or the request by staff, based upon Mike or by Chuck's input. So we know what we're getting ourselves into. That's what you're asking for. And I think
Just
that
for
makes all-
scheduling purposes, whether or not it's going to be
Right.
in person or whether
Right.
it's going to be a remote session. I don't, whether it's closed or open or all that is fine, but just the general procedure for scheduling and getting the 5 of us together on the same page.
But for example, if it was a closed session, which it probably would, I mean, a hybrid session, and you had trouble getting there because you're at work, you could take an hour off and maybe go to your office and have plan to be in your office and participate by Zoom, as long as it's noticed ahead of time. That's what we had discussed earlier. So if if you couldn't make it, then you could join by Zoom, as long as it's posted by so many days before the meeting. Is that correct, Council Holtman?
Yes, generally. I think I would have a conversation when you have a specific context. I can discuss it with one or both of you or with Mike, and we could look at the precise circumstances and see what we can do to step through and make sure that we're meeting the statute, but also accommodating circumstances.
Okay, but I think the primary requirement, if recalling what Mike has told me, is that basically we have to have it has to be noticed and it has to be in a public place. Those are the 2 requirements if you can't physically be at the meeting. So if you're noticed and you're at a public place where people can come in or be invited, then we should be okay.
And if you are connected both audio and visual.
Video, which Zoom would do for us, of course. Okay, but we should make that clear when we try to set up a meeting so people understand. If it's going to be a hybrid meeting, we could just mention again, if you're not going to be there, these are the 2 requirements you have to meet or something like that. Okay, anything else, Manager Loth?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if no other topics or questions, then I'll take a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. A second from someone?
I'll second.
I don't know who said that. Manager Loth, I'm gonna give it to Manager Loth. Okay. Bobby, do a roll call vote for adjournment. Bobby, you still with us?
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Meeting adjourned at 8:40. So thanks, everybody. Good meeting and have a good night.